Hello class, today we've been first-hand and second-hand accounts when we are studying a story. So first person is there and sees it and feels it and really experiences it. Second-hand account is when someone hears about it or reads about it in a different source of literature. So today we're going to read hand and second-hand accounts of the same historical event. You will also compare two accounts of the term and the focus of the information that is presented. When you do, I want you to question things like, what is the reader thinking? And how is the reader's thoughts going to review on what the point of view is? So we are about to get started. I'd like you to put your finger on the first word of the story and get ready to follow along.
To Space and Back by Sally Ride. Launch minus 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. The three launch engines light. The shuttle shakes and strains at the bolts holding it to the launch pod. The computers check the engines. It isn't up to us anymore. The computers will decide whether we launch. 3, 2, 1. The rockets light. The shuttle leaps off the launch pad in a cloud of steam and a trail of fire. Inside, the ride is rough and loud. Our heads are rattling around inside our helmets. We can barely hear the voices from mission control in our headsets above the thunder of the rockets and engines. For an instant, I wonder if everything is working right. But there's no time to wonder, and no time to be scared. In a few seconds, we zoom past the clouds. 2 minutes later, the rockets burn out, and with a brilliant whitish-orange flash, they fall away from the shuttle as it streaks on toward space. Suddenly, the ride becomes very, very smooth and quiet. The shuttle is still attached to the big tank, and the launch engines are pushing us out of Earth's atmosphere. The sky is black. See, of the trail of fire behind us is a faint, pulsating glow through the top window. Launch plus 6 minutes. The force pushing us against the backs of our seats steadily increases. We can barely move because we're being held in place by a force of 3 Gs. It's the force of gravity we feel on Earth. At first, we don't mind it. We've all felt much more than that when we've done acrobatics in our jet training airplanes. But that lasted only a few seconds, and this seems to go on forever. After a couple of minutes of 3 Gs, we're uncomfortable, straining to hold our books on our laps and craning our necks against the force to read the instruments. I find myself wishing we'd hurry up and get into orbit. Launch plus 8.5 minutes. The launch engines cut off. Suddenly, the force is gone, and we lurch forward in our seats. During the next few minutes, the empty fuel tank drops away and falls to Earth, and we are very busy getting the shuttle ready to enter orbit. But we're not too busy to notice that our books and pencils are floating in the mid-air. We are in space!
Sally Ride, the first American woman to go into space, shared her thoughts, feelings, and experiences in her memoir, To Space and Back. Which details in the expert from Space and Back explain the why Sally writes, I find myself wishing we'd hurry up and get into orbit. Why is it that she wanted to get into orbit? Next, I want you to think about the summarization. Summarize memorable milestones, space shuttle missions. Include 2 key details that tell about the main idea. So while we read this article, I want you to think about the main idea, and I want you to think about the summarization of why it is that we have space milestones. The last thing we're going to think about is explaining the sequence of events to describe To Space and Back that made up the space shuttle's launch and entry into space orbit. Sequential words are words that have to do with first, next, then, and last. Sequence and chronological order is a type of text structure. We need to think about what sequence of events describe To Space and Back and make up the shuttle's launch and entry into the space orbit. While I read the story, I'd like you to follow along with me. Put your finger on this first word, and we are about to begin.
Day in history. June 18th, 1983. Memorable milestones. space shuttle missions. A crowd of about 250,000 gathered early that bright June morning at Cape Canaveral, Florida, many wearing Ride, Sally Ride t-shirts. Across the nation, many others also watched and waited. Suddenly, the engines ignited and smoke and steam billowed across the site. Then, booster rockets lifted the huge space shuttle slowly into the air. Gathering speed, the Challenger blasted off into orbit for its second mission. At the same moment, one crew member, mission specialist Sally K. Ride, was rocketing into history. Ride was America's first woman to travel into space. Sally Ride had earned the right to be aboard the space shuttle. A physicist, she had been in astronaut training for 6 years. She had also worked at mission control, relaying messages to shuttle crews during earlier shuttle flights. Ride had even helped develop a robotic arm to use in space. This knowledge and experience had led Captain Bob Crippen to choose her as a crew member, and Ride was ready for the challenge. In just over 8 minutes, launch engines were lifting Challenger to its 184-mile-high orbit. During the ascent, Ride acted as flight engineer, calling out checklists to the pilots. She also joked with mission control about the exciting ride. Once in orbit, the 5 astronauts wasted little time. In the busy days ahead, the crew completed a number of experiments. This included using radar and a high-resolution camera to study the Earth's atmosphere. Ride helped launch 2 communication satellites. She also became the first woman to operate the shuttle's robotic arm by releasing a satellite into orbit.
Now that we've read the passage about this day in history, I want you to look at clue words that tell us why this story might be first-hand or second-hand account. In some reasons, this hand is a second-hand account. It tells us factual details about Sally's ride and about the things she did while riding on the spaceship. When you answer the questions, I'd like you to think to yourself, how are the details about Sally Ride's personality and memorable milestones different from those in To Space and Back? I want you to think about different things that are factual and observant. Think about how the author in Sally's Ride tells us about how Sally is feeling versus the information in This Day in History tells us about how people observed Sally Ride's personality. Please take this time now to answer the questions following these passage. When you follow the questions in this passage, you need to think about the answer details that support the answer you are choosing. You will have 10 minutes to answer these questions aloud, and we will go over them in class. Please begin.